Alrighty, so today is the April 29th Ortelius Architecture meeting for the state's time zone. There is going to be a Brad McCoy is going to be doing the Australian time zone today, 4:30 Mountain Time, if that time works out better for you. I think it works out to be like 8 or 8, I think 8:30 Australian, probably Sydney time zone. So that's just a heads up. So just a quick couple things. Sergio, I think your little tutorial how to stand up the mini cube with Ortelius in it was brilliant. Really liked it. So a nice job on that. It was well done.
Thank you. It was like, I don't know, we can do like a lot of things better over there, and then I will love to add what to work on that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think doing a small set of videos like that will really help down the road. So you'll have to give us all the a list of all the tools that you used and where the resources were. So I'll open a GitHub issue, or if there's an issue out there, I'll go ahead and update it and mention you in it so we can get a list of tools that you used. On the architecture front, had a couple of interesting conversations this week with some folks, and one of the things that has come up, like Tracy goes and does these interviews with people to find out what they're doing around microservices. And I can't remember if it was a DevSecOps person or if it was like a developer role, but what came up was Swagger and the RESTful API sets. And, we're building out the service catalog with the things like the PagerDuty, the Slack channel for the developers, what is the Slack channel? The dependencies at the container level, the package dependencies of what's in the container. And the idea of Swagger came up as well. If we could hook in Swagger in some way. Now, I've only used Swagger once, and from what I remember, it was like a YAML file that has a specific format, and that there's like a Swagger online that you can use to render that file. Has anybody done that, been able to render Swagger like locally? If there's like a Swagger module or Node.js for Swagger or something like that we could leverage?
There's a load of options around it. So we use Swagger quite a lot internally. To be honest, actually, even Doxy, if I remember correctly, can render it. So Swagger and OpenAPI are generally pretty interchangeable.
Oh, nice.
Nowadays. The tools which work with one work for the other. Swagger kind of evolved into OpenAPI. So if you've got a tool which works with OpenAPI, 95% of the time it will work with Swagger completely fine. But yeah, I'll dig out some of the stuff we're using. But yeah, you can render it online. You can also, generally most of the libraries will support standing up essentially a Swagger endpoint alongside with your service, which exposes the API on a specified port. And that Swagger is really just static content at that point.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is, in when you're setting up a component version or the base component, that we would get the either the link or the location of the Swagger YAML file, whether it's in a Git repo or if it's part of like the Docker build, as part of next to the source code or something like that. But I'm kind of thinking that we would then take the Swagger file and persist it because I don't believe they're that huge that would persist it in the database along with the component version. And then, yeah.
So probably the best option there. So Swagger, when you render it, it does also output a JSON file, which might be easier for us to consume and use. Something, I think, if I remember correctly, Spotify's Backstage, which is, I want to say, React-based. They have a part of their technical documentation module for that points at you can point it at a Git repo with the Swagger location in it, and it can go and it can link to that and render some of that. So that might be something worth having a skim through to see how they're doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Because one of the things, the end goal, it would be to, you have your microservice. It's been cataloged in Ortelius. You want to find out as a developer, what are the endpoints and how do I interact with the endpoints, and be able to just click and pull up the Swagger documentation and then do some basic interaction with it. Like Postman. I think Swagger has a way to post queries to it, right?
Yeah, if you're using the Swagger UI, depending on how you've got it configured, there's generally kind of an example box underneath each endpoint where you can click on it and provide a couple of parameters to send something through.
Yeah, because I think that'd be kind of slick to have that where you can interact with the microservice and through the Swagger UI and be able to. I think it'd be a good benefit for from the developers aspect. Does that make sense to go down this path?
Or definitely, because most of the organization, when they start with any service, they follow up API first approach. So first thing that they create is basically a API contract or Swagger YAML file, and based on that they go ahead. Okay. And also there's one more thing, that Swagger Hub is there. So it's provide a central place to like store all your Swagger files. So so in our organization we use Swagger Hub to share and interact with that. So it's a common place like everyone can see when it team.
Okay.
Just to expand on that, there's also slightly different way of interacting with Swagger, which kind of makes this kind of discovery even more powerful or more useful, or it's a missing gap. So the way we use Swagger is we don't write the Swagger YAML file, at least in the .NET code or the Python code, whereas a Swagger library or the Open API library we're using allows us to decorate the methods we're defining, and it generates the Swagger off the back of that. So it's not a case of writing the YAML initially and then implementing it. It's actually decorated in with the code. The tricky bit with that from a kind of ongoing lifecycle perspective is discovering Swagger, discovering the API endpoints. If it's not being published to somewhere which is easily discoverable, teams add new features to the service. Sometimes contract testing isn't in place, but it is in the Swagger because it's being generated automatically whenever there is a build of that code or a run of that code. So we've run into situations where the lack of a central repository until recently has been a major issue with consumption of services, when someone's added something and then it hasn't been well shared.
Well, that's why when we create the component version, that would be typically comes out of the build. So you build your container. That's where I'm thinking at that point, if we could, in the scenario that you're talking about, Owen, bring in the Swagger YAML or the Swagger JSON, whichever one works out better, and bring that in and persist it in our database alongside the component version, which has the link to the Git repo, the Docker registry, kind of centralizing everything. And then, Karam, in your case where you have like Swagger Hub, that would just be where we'd be pointing to the URL for that version of the API in the Swagger Hub. That's kind of what I'm kicking around in my head.
Does anybody had experience actually with normalization of the Swagger? I mean, what if two teams come up with actually same API, but maybe they will end up with a different Swagger YAML fine, this is possible, or is it possible to normalize it? Simply find out this is unique definition of service, just to make sure that this is actually what you want to really index, right? You want to make a version of the. So let's.
So in your scenario, you're saying that two different people are writing the same API endpoint, or is it one team writing one format of the Swagger YAML or JSON, and another team doing it slightly different?
Well, exactly. Somehow avoid this duplicity, if there is any. But I don't have this experience. We've been using in our project Swagger quite a lot. And by the way, last year I experienced a team where we find REST API too tightly coupling the services, so we moved to Kafka. We tried to, this was the only accepted, like loose coupled, and we tried to hard minimize any REST. Even before before years, we use very extensively REST and SOAP even or something. But keep in mind too.
Well, that would be an interesting downstream add-on to what we're talking about. Would be you have the REST, the RESTful API endpoints that this microservice is publishing, and then, like you said, Taras, the other side is what are the RESTful APIs that this microservice is consuming. That's a little bit harder to derive because you get into code scanners and stuff like that, and it's not very intuitive to discover that. But I think we may be able to back end it around with the research that Karam's been doing, like on open telemetry and the Prometheus and those types of transaction logs, where we can kind of overlay the two down the road here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thumbs up to kind of do some more research on this.
Yeah, I think we can, well, how to say, OpenAPI has like a complete life cycle and way to manage that. So yeah, I think we should have an extended conversation, because usually you can just develop at the end, like expose your API using libraries and publishing you all over the development from OpenAPI specification, and that has a life cycle like publishing, sharing, and stuff like that. So let's do some space for that conversation.
Okay. So Owen, I'm going to kind of throw a little bit research over your way to see what tools we should be looking at. If this is going to be a Node.js, if we want to, how we want to interact with it, since he has some experience on that side. And then Karam, if you can kind of lay out how you're using Swagger Hub, because I'm totally unfamiliar with Swagger Hub, and I'd like to find out how we'd handle that scenario as well.
Sure, sounds good to me.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's something which I know Linkerd does, but I don't know if Istio does. I'd need to look into it. So Linkerd's got a really interesting option where it can actually import a Swagger and open API spec and use that to enrich the service catalog. I don't know if Istio has a similar functionality. I expect there's something along those lines, but it might be worth being aware of while we're looking at the service catalog, in case Istio does have that element to it too. Is that question of showing what the API interactions are between services. We're currently doing something similar using the Linkerd plus the Open API spec to kind of generate what actual endpoint services are calling and various other things. So just something to be aware of.
Okay. And what's that called in Linkerd? Is it is it like a catalog registry, or I mean a service registry, or?
So it's a service profile, if I remember correctly.
Okay,
So
that's what they're calling.
Yeah, you import an API spec, associate it with a service, and then it uses that for kind of enriching the telemetry you can get out of it to say these API endpoints were hit with these parameters and all that kind of information.
Got it. All right. Yeah, I have not.
Can share the and Red Hat, we have a life cycle for this and actually for that. So I can share is mostly open source tools, so it can be a start point just to what we can use.
Yeah, that sounds good. Don't want to kind of want to put a small box around this so we're not having too many people going too many different directions. But so yeah, whatever you have, Sergio, that would be great. And we can start taking a look at this. Okay, perfect. That was the main thing that I wanted to kind of cover today, per the conversations that have kind of popped up this week around that. Does anybody have anything else going on that they'd like to talk about?
Well, I just want to point out some of this stuff that we're getting. I continue to do discovery calls. I'm doing probably about 5 now a week. And some of these ideas come from those discovery calls. So I'll continue to reach out to folks and do those discovery calls.
Okay. And I will add in more details into our meeting notes. So if you haven't done so, just go ahead and add your line.
And the only thing else I have is we need to start thinking about going through all of this code and changing the license. We need to get that done. It's not a huge technical effort. I was thinking that maybe we could get, Powell wants to do more coding, and that might be a good place for him to start getting an understanding of how things are fitting together. But Steve, could you talk about what we need to do to get that done?
Yeah, so the code is currently commented with the a Feral 2 license, and it has a copyright, I think, to one of our companies called Catalyst Systems Corporation or OpenMake Software. I can't remember how it's copyrighted, but we need to change that to an Apache 2 license. So any of the source code, which has the header at the top, we need to go ahead and put the license to Apache 2 and attribute it to the Linux Foundation as the owner of the license at that level. We do it to the Linux Foundation, not to the CDF.
I don't know. I would guess it's to the Linux Foundation.
That's what I'm assuming.
We'll have to clarify that.
I'm assuming it's going to be up to the Linux Foundation, since that's the parent, the real organization.
Yeah, but we'll have to maybe send an email to Tracy and ask her that or to Dan Lawrence.
Yeah, I'll reach out and get the answer to that. But basically, there's we're going to have a few files, probably 1,000 files that we need to look at. I have tried in the past to run tools little programs to go strip and replace copyrights, but they don't always necessarily work very pretty. So it's going to be a little bit of poking around and doing a cut and paste along those lines. So that's kind of what's happening on that front. The at the repo level, flipping the license is just a matter of doing a PR at that level. So that's not going to be an issue there. The only problem that we'll have is if the license change takes too long to do, we'll get it. We have the potential to get some merge conflicts that we'll need to resolve. It's manageable, but that's a possibility that we can run into. So that's kind of what we're looking at. If anybody knows of those little tools to do the search and replace that actually work, if you could throw them my way, that'd be great.
Similar to you, all of the ones I've tried have mostly worked. It's probably the right way of describing it.
That's the way I run into it mostly works. Some scenarios with some languages, they work perfectly. Sometimes they just fall over really bad.
Well, maybe we have
So one query, like what does changing the licenses involve? Like what we have to make changes from the code perspective?
Yeah, let me show you real quick. I think I got one up. So let me share my screen. Get out of the way, zoom. So jump over. So this is the, like I said, that we have the monolith still for Ortelius, and let me just pull up like API here. What we have is at the very top is the license here. So this section and every single file for all the Java code needs to be changed. This is referring to the Feral license. It would have to be changed over to the GNU license. And while we're in here, we should probably do the SPDX tags as well to be more compliant with the packaging on that front. So putting in replacing the verbiage with the Apache 2, attributing it to the Linux Foundation, and putting in the SPDX tags is something that we would do. Now this would happen on all the different files. So like login will have something very similar. They're pretty well standardized, like in the Java code, but if you get into some of like the C code, it's going to be a different world. The C has different commenting. Some of them are inline, some of them are, it's not consistent. That's what part of the issue that we run into. Where's my workspace? And the same thing with the Python code. I don't see my workspace. I said I don't load in the C code into Eclipse. It drives Eclipse crazy. There we go. Come on. It hasn't woken up either. Engine. So here's like the C++ code. And like on this one, this audit file does not have the header on it. So like I said, some of these have them, some of them don't. And that's where we just need to make sure that everything's covered. I believe go like to DM API. See. So that's kind of what we have to do at that level. And then in whatever file that that is text that we can comment, we'll need to put the license in. Images, we won't comment, but that will be covered by the license at the repo level. So that's kind of what we need to do. I believe there's an issue out there around this. So if anybody has, like I said, any tools, if you could pass them across in Discord, that would be great.
For Java code, I guess Eclipse has something related to formatting of the files, so we can have a look at that. But for C++, I think it will be manual or like some other tool.
Yeah, I think it's exactly. I think it's gonna be a mix of tools, and I think also it's just gonna be a cut and paste effort on some of it. And I think we can get some people that are new to the coding world to help us out on this, kind of divide and conquer the process. So we can have somebody do the C code, we have somebody that do the Java code, somebody to do the Python, kind of split it up that way. It was a plumbing, here it is. So the issue is 176. So if you have anything, any tools, please add them to 176 issue. That would be great. And specify what language it's for. Or you can throw them to me in Discord and I'll pick them up from there. Anything else? I will update the meeting minutes later today with what we talked about. And I think that's it for today for me. I believe on Monday we'll have another stand-up to keep things moving along on development front. So that will be the next time we chat. All right, hearing silence, I think we're done.
Well, maybe.
Hey.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.